Two major defense companies are in a battle for the future of Canada's fighter jet fleet.
Locked in a trade fight with Donald Trump, you may have heard that the Carney government is reconsidering its multi-billion-dollar purchase of American F-35 fighter jets. Now, the leading candidate as possible replacement would be the Swedish Gripen.
Critics argue that, the scores obviously favored the F-35 because the Royal Canadian Air Force has always wanted the F-35, so that the tasks or the criteria might have been biased in favor of the F-35.
Canada's fighter jet debate is heating up again, and this time, it's not just about aircraft. It's about jobs, sovereignty, rising costs, and a defense strategy that could shape the next 4 decades. The conversation has shifted from simple procurement to a much deeper national question. What kind of military and industrial future does Canada want to build? Let's start with the issue that keeps coming up in Ottawa. According to government officials, there aren't enough Canadian jobs being created from the massive F-35 contract. Billions are leaving the country, and very little of that investment is returning to Canada's own aerospace industry. That concern is now reaching the highest levels of government, with some lawmakers openly saying that Canada must demand more economic benefit from such a large defense purchase. But critics go even further. BP and other opposition voices argue that the entire F-35 program should be canceled. Their question is blunt: is this aircraft too much for what Canada actually needs? And even more importantly, does it make financial sense? Canada initially believed it was buying certainty, a stable price, a fixed contract, and a modern fighter fleet without major surprises. But the surprises came anyway. The initial 2022 estimate of $19 billion didn't survive long. By 2025, projections had climbed to $27.7 billion, an increase of nearly 50% after just one budget cycle. And nobody inside the system is comfortable saying the number will stop there. The Auditor General, Karen Hogan, confirmed that additional costs and delays are still likely. When you factor in everything, base upgrades, weapons, long-term sustainment, the total cost could reach over 33 billion Canadian dollars. And that doesn't include the unexpected infrastructure requirements that appeared after the ink dried on the contract. Hangars, power systems, and security networks, at least 5.5 billion USD worth of upgrades, were quietly added to the bill later. So what was supposed to be a straightforward modernization effort is now turning into a multi-decade financial commitment. Even worse, several former military leaders warn that Canada currently lacks enough trained pilots and adequate hangar space to support the fleet. They describe the situation as a reduction in capability, not an upgrade. Some have even called the entire procurement a boondoggle, a project riddled with delays, overruns, and questionable planning. Inside government, doubts are also growing. Key planning still relies on outdated 2019 data, and internal documents reveal that officials are only about 50% confident in the cost projections being shared publicly. Cold Lake and Bagotville, two essential RCAF bases, need major reconstruction before they can even host the aircraft. Canada isn't just buying a jet, it's being forced to rebuild the environment around it. So the big question becomes, are we seeing the real cost now, or just the first chapter of a much larger financial story? Before we go deeper, make sure to like and subscribe if you want more detailed breakdowns like this, because as you'll see, the story gets even more complex. To understand the risks Canada faces, it helps to look at Switzerland, one of the most precise and cautious countries in defense spending. In 2021, Switzerland approved a fixed-price deal for 36 F-35s at a cost of 6 billion Swiss francs. Officials promised that costs would remain tightly controlled. But only a few years later, unexpected U.S. adjustments added between 650 million and 1.5 billion Swiss francs to the bill. Swiss citizens were furious. The fighter jet purchase quickly turned from a quiet procurement into a national political crisis. Reports revealed that former Defense Minister Viola Amherd may have known about the cost risks months earlier than she admitted publicly. The Swiss Federal Audit Office had even warned that the fixed price clause wasn't legally solid. But in the rush to appear decisive, those warnings were ignored. Then came another shock. U.S. tariffs on Swiss goods jumped to 39%, the highest in Europe. Suddenly, the F-35 purchase wasn't just a military decision. It became a pressure point in broader economic relations with Washington. If a country as meticulous as Switzerland couldn't avoid these pitfalls, what does that mean for Canada? How safe is any guaranteed price when the buyer doesn't control the production system behind it? Canada is now asking itself that exact question. After Switzerland's troubles and Canada's own rising costs, the federal government began reassessing its situation. Prime Minister Mark Carney ordered a full review of the F-35 contract, acknowledging that Canada relies too heavily on the United States for upgrades, maintenance, and long-term support. He instructed Defense Minister Bill Blair to explore alternatives, everything from different aircraft to the possibility of producing future fighters inside Canada. At the same time, Ottawa began discussions with the European Union to explore ways to reduce U.S. dependency. That includes evaluating European-designed jets like Sweden's Gripen, which offer not just military capability but also industrial partnership. Industry Minister Melanie Joly added another layer of pressure, questioning why a multi-billion-dollar program delivers so little economic benefit for Canadians. Her stance is simple. If Canada is going to spend billions on defense, the investment should strengthen Canadian industry, not flow overseas. Canada has already committed to its first 16 F-35s, but the remaining 72 aircraft, most of the fleet, are not locked in. That gives Ottawa flexibility, a chance to reconsider the direction of the entire program, and that's where Sweden's Gripen steps into the picture. When Canada began looking beyond the F-35, the Gripen stood out for reasons that have nothing to do with prestige and everything to do with practicality. Canada has a vast territory, harsh winters, and limited budgets. It needs a fighter that can operate anywhere, not just from major air bases. In this model, the fighter jet is only part of the story. The real question becomes, does Canada want to buy a plane or build an entire industry around one? But even with all these benefits, Canada faces a deep internal divide. Air Force leaders warn that adopting two different fighter types creates complexity. Two training systems, two supply chains, two maintenance pipelines. They argue that split fleets increase long-term costs and reduce combat efficiency. Former Chief of Defense Staff Tom Lawson goes further, saying the F-35's technological edge makes a mixed fleet strategically risky during high-intensity conflict. But economic ministers see things differently. Minister Joly notes that many G7 nations operate mixed fleets specifically to avoid dependency and strengthen domestic industry. In her view, the cost of complexity is smaller than the cost of relying on a single foreign supplier. Gripen supporters argue that even if Canada trains for two aircraft types, the long-term savings could still outweigh the rigid dependency built into the F-35 system. They frame the choice not as efficiency versus inefficiency, but as dependence versus flexibility. And that's the heart of the debate. In the end, this isn't just a question about engines, stealth coatings, or radar systems. It's about direction. Does Canada commit to a uniform, US-aligned fleet, streamlined but dependent? Or does it take the harder path, building an industrial backbone that could support future generations of aerospace workers and engineers? Because the F-35 and Gripen debate isn't merely a contest between two aircraft. It's a debate about identity and the kind of economic and strategic nation Canada intends to be 30 or 40 years from now. Is the priority absolute military performance at any price, or the creation of a fighter ecosystem rooted here at home, one that grows jobs, expertise, and independence? That is the crossroads Canada stands at tonight. Thanks for watching, and tell me where you'd like to go next. Another angle on this debate, or a completely different story. Your thoughts drive this channel, so drop them in the comments.